Codifying your infrastructure as code is a great first step, but how do you automate that code in a CI/CD pipeline? Firefly is here to help with their new Workflows feature. Let's get into it. What's up, everybody? I'm Ned Bellavance, nedinthecloud.com, and today's video is about leveraging the new Workflows feature in Firefly to help automate your infrastructure as code deployments or augment your existing deployment workflow. We'll take a look at how you can add a new workflow to an existing repository of code, check out the additional tracking and features that come with Firefly, and how you can add those Firefly features to an existing workflow instead. The key here is flexibility, using the approach that works best for your team and your preferred tooling. Before I jump into the Workflows feature on Firefly, first, a quick bit of background for anyone who hasn't seen Firefly before. I have a video dedicated to getting started with the platform, but the core idea is that Firefly can help discover your existing infrastructure, codify it, and keep tabs on it as it evolves over time. Up until now, Firefly didn't get involved in the automation portion of things. It was aware of your actual infrastructure, the code behind it, and the state data that connected it. But it was up to you to build out your own IAC automation pipeline or leverage one of the Terraform automation solutions that are out there. That's changing with the introduction of Workflows. Workflows is a way for Firefly to help create or augment an IAC automation process on your preferred CI/CD platform. Firefly is not trying to build an automation platform that you need to adopt because they rightly determined that most teams already have one or more CI/CD platforms available to them. Instead of tacking on yet another pipeline language for you to learn and maintain, instead, Firefly simply wants to help you develop an automation workflow using your existing toolset. Or if you've already automated your infrastructure as code, they can augment it with their workflow features. What are those features? Well, why don't we walk through a demo to show you how a workflow is built from scratch, and then I'll highlight some of the features along the way. For the first demo, I am going to be adding IAC automation to an existing repository. The repository in question is here, and it has Terraform code to deploy an AWS VPC and EC2 instance. Looking in the terraform.tf file, it is configured to use S3 as the state backend, and I've kept it simple to include a full configuration for the backend. In the variables.tf, it takes an environment name that is used for tagging, so we'll want to supply a value for that input variable as part of the automation. Okay, so let's head over to the Firefly console. Firefly uses integrations to query for infrastructure, code repositories, and state data. I have Firefly connected to my AWS account and my GitHub account that has the repository. Now let's create the workflow. In Workflows, I'll start a new workflow and select Terraform as the type. Other types will be supported in the future, such as OpenTofu. We want Firefly to help build and manage the workflow, so I'll select Create an IAC pipeline. We'll go back later and see how you can add a workflow to your existing IAC pipelines. First up, our GitHub Actions is going to reach back to our Firefly account with the results of plans and applies, which means that GitHub Actions run needs to authenticate to Firefly. Firefly uses API key pairs to do so, which I've already generated. Over in the repository, if we take a look at the GitHub Actions secrets, I have the key pair along with my AWS credentials stored there. Back in the Firefly UI, workflows are associated with a workspace, so you can have multiple workflows pointing at the same code, managing different environments. That's outside the scope of this video, but it's good to know. I'll call this workspace Production. I'll pick my GitHub VCS integration and type in the repository name. It will automatically select the default branch, but if you're managing multiple environments using branches, you could build out the deployment for a different branch. For the workspace configuration, we need to pick what version of Terraform we want to use. I'll pick the latest version, And then we have a bunch of items we can use to customize the deployment. A lot of people include a tf-vars file in their repository for each environment. You can point it at that file here. If you're using the same state backend for multiple environments, you can also add an environment name here that Firefly will use to create a Terraform workspace by the same name. Let's use production. If you'd prefer to specify some of your own variable values directly in line, you can do that in the section below. We want to specify the environment variable, so I'll add environment, and then I'll set it equal to production. Lastly, you can inject secrets values that are stored in your VCS. For instance, if I have sensitive values stored in GitHub Action Secrets, I can reference them here with the name of the input variable in the Terraform config and the name of the secret in GitHub Actions. The Advanced Configurations section gives us a chance to further customize the workflow. Since we're using AWS, we can choose to create an AWS profile, which will use the AWS CLI action to create a temporary profile on the runner. The actual values for the secret key and access key will need to be stored in the VCS secrets. You're not plopping them in plain text here. I'll create a profile named default that the AWS provider will locate automatically. Then for the access key, I'll enter AWS access key ID, and the secret key is AWS secret access key. These values are both stored in the repository secrets, as we saw earlier. Below that is what Firefly is calling provider credentials. But really, this is the section where you can add whatever environment variables that you want available to the runner's actions as the pipeline executes. Just like earlier, you're not specifying the values directly. Instead, it's a reference to the secrets stored in GitHub Actions. Now, we don't need to add anything here, so I'll simply click Next, and that brings up the deployment pipeline. What's in that pipeline? Let's check it out. The pipeline fires when there's a push on the main branch, a pull request targeting the main branch, or a workflow dispatch with the input apply. Workflow dispatch is a way to manually trigger an action from the GitHub UI, CLI, or API. There is one job here called deploy running on the latest Ubuntu image. The Firefly credential and any Terraform variable values you specified in the wizard are configured as environment variables at the job level. The first task checks out the repository, and it includes the logic to set apply to true if it's a manual run or a merge to main. Then the AWS profile is configured. Next, the Terraform version we selected is installed. And after that, Terraform is initialized. Right now, the init command doesn't include any flags for the backend config. If you wanted to use a partial config, you'd have to alter this command. Since we elected to create a workspace, the init task also creates and selects the production workspace. If the init task is successful, then it will run the Terraform plan and save the plan logs and contents to files that will be parsed by Firefly in the next task. Post-plan, the Firefly task consumes the saved plan files and updates the Firefly UI with the results. If the plan is successful and there is an apply run, then the apply task will trigger running an apply and saving the results to a log file. And lastly, the log file from the apply is processed by another Firefly task. All right, cool. That's everything that's in the pipeline. Let's create a pull request to add this actions workflow to the repository. Over in the repository, there is a new pull request from a branch Firefly created for this GitHub action. Since this is a pull request, it will automatically run a Terraform plan, but not an apply. The results of the plan will be saved to the Firefly UI. Let's check on the status of the run. It looks like it finished, so back in the Firefly UI, our production workspace is in a plan complete state. Looking inside the plan, it not only tells you what will be created, it also shows a map of the related resources. That's pretty cool, especially when you have a more complicated deployment. On the left, it lists out the estimated cost and any possible policy violations. Clicking on those violations will show what policies are being violated and the level of severity. Now, these policies are coming from check marks, but you will be able to craft your own policies using kicks very soon. If I just want to know about a specific resource, I can click on it and it shows me the desired configuration, a cost analysis for that resource, and any policy violations. I'll ignore those violations for now and go back to GitHub and merge the pull request. By merging the pull request to main, that will kick off a new run. And this time, since it's a merge, the action will be a plan and apply. The apply might take a few moments since we're creating an EC2 instance, so I'll jump ahead to when it's finished. Okay, the action has finished, and back in the Firefly UI, it shows the results of the apply along with what triggered the run, what was changed, and the policy and cost info that we saw from the plan run. I can continue to manage the GitHub actions from this workspace by clicking on the pencil and making changes, which would then create a pull request with a new branch and I could apply it. Or I could start managing the actions myself directly in GitHub using the generated actions from Firefly simply as a starting point. Now, what about an existing repository where I'm already using GitHub actions? Now, good news, you can easily add Firefly to any CI/CD pipeline. Over in VS Code, I have a repository here that deploys an Azure resource group and a virtual network. Looking in the GitHub Workflows directory, I've already got a merge and PR pipeline set up. I just want to add Firefly to the mix. Back in the Firefly UI, I'll create a new workflow, select Terraform, and this time pick Integrate into an existing IAC pipeline. I'll give the workspace the name dev-azure-taconet. Based on the instructions to integrate Firefly with an existing pipeline, the first thing I need is an API key pair, which I already have. Then I need to add the Firefly API key pair to my version control system. Headed over into the GitHub repository, if we take a look in the secrets, I've already added the two values here. I also need to add these values as environment variables to my actions. Heading back to VS Code, in the dev-pr.yaml file, I'll add them as environment variables at the job level. That's going to be Firefly access key and Firefly secret key, and I have the text for that already stored in a separate file to make it easier to copy and paste. Another thing I need to note here is the addition of an option for the Terraform installation action. When Terraform is installed, it also includes a wrapper script by default that helps other GitHub actions parse the Terraform output. But the Firefly integration needs the raw output, so I have the Terraform wrapper setting set to false. With that configured, I now need to update the plan command so the correct log files are generated. I'm going to copy the part of the example after the plan command and go back to the dev-pr file that's in VS Code. Inside the file, plan happens after validate, so I will go down to the plan action and paste in the suggested portion of the command. We also need to save the plan to a file called tf.plan and set the output type to JSON, and I already have that in my command. After the plan is complete, I need to add a task for Firefly to process the contents of the plan. There's a few ways to do that. The directions provide a way to do it with a bash script or a Docker run. That's great for other CI/CD platforms, but I already know there's a GitHub action to do this, and I can pretty much just copy and paste the task from the previous workflow example. I have the actual action to add into the plan in that file we saw earlier, toadd.txt, but I could have copied it over from the previous example. One thing I'll note is that the inputs for the files need the full path, not the working directory set in the defaults for the pipeline. My working directory is the development directory, so I'll need to add that to the file names. And that'll do it for my dev-pr YAML file. I'm going to make similar adjustments to my merge YAML file. I'll jump ahead to when those are complete. All right, I have made the changes to the merge file, which included adding those environment variables, and then down below the apply, adding a final action that will run the Firefly post-apply check on what's in the log files. To make sure there's some changes that actually will be applied to the target environment, I've changed the subnet ranges in the terraform.tf-vars file, and I'm going to make them invalid on purpose to see what happens. This is being created on a new branch called add-firefly, so I'll commit these changes locally, and then I'll push the branch up to the GitHub repository. Over in GitHub, I'll create a pull request to merge the changes into the main branch, and that will kick off the workflow that's stored in the dev-pr.yaml. Let's jump ahead to when that action has completed. The plan has completed successfully. If I go back to the Firefly UI and click on the Done button to close out the window, the new workspace now appears, Dev Azure TacoNet, and it shows a status of plan completed. I can review the plan if I want to, but I know that there's a mistake in here. I'm going to approve it anyway, and then we'll see how we can fix it. I'll go back to the GitHub repository and merge the PR, which will kick off my other GitHub actions, dev-merge.yaml. Let's jump ahead to when that action has completed. The apply did not complete successfully because of the invalid CIDR addresses. And because the apply failed, the Firefly post-apply step did not run. If you want it to run anyway, you have to update the logic so that it will run regardless of the success or failure of the previous step. Because you maintain full control over the configuration of the pipeline, you get to determine the order in which tasks are run and when they execute. Taking a look in the UI, we still only see the plan step in here. So what I need to do now is go back, update the terraform.tf-vars file to have a valid range for the CIDR subnets, and then go through the same PR and merge process to push my updates to the target environment, at which point they will be recorded by this workspace. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to when that's happened. All right, I made the change, pushed it up to the repository, and merged the pull request in, which ran both the apply for Terraform and the post-apply step for Firefly. Going back to the Firefly UI, my dev Azure TacoNet is now in a status of applied, showing how you can integrate Firefly Workflows into an existing CI/CD pipeline. In the two demonstrations, you got to see two different ways of adding a workspace to workflows, either using a managed experience that builds the pipeline for you, or integrating it with an existing pipeline. I want to highlight a few key points. The managed experience is only available for GitHub Actions right now, but it will be expanded to other VCS and CI/CD platforms in the near future. Firefly is trying to provide a guided experience for those who haven't automated their Terraform deployments yet and aren't sure where to start. You can always take the produced pipeline and alter it to meet your needs, but at least you aren't starting with a blank piece of paper. I also know that they're planning to add more options to the wizard to make it more flexible and fully featured. If you have an existing automation pipeline today, you can integrate Firefly into that experience. You don't have to use a specific pipeline platform, just one that can run a bash script or use a Docker container. If your pipeline can't handle that, I'm not sure why you continue to use it. In return, you get greater visibility of your runs from a Terraform-specific perspective, and it ties to the inventory that Firefly is already tracking. Policies are checked using check marks, and there's even a cost estimation feature. The core idea is that Firefly doesn't want to be prescriptive about what automation solution you choose. They just want to augment that solution to help you manage your infrastructure real estate more effectively. Workflows are just hitting GA, and there's still a lot the Firefly team wants to add. Here are some things they told me are coming down the pike. Adding in pipeline blockers and auto-approval policies. Adding static code analysis and testing for best practices. Adding custom kicks queries to the checkmarks policy run. Including AI insights and remediation suggestions for warnings or errors. Now, of course, that's what they have planned, but they're always looking for feedback, so you can let them know what features you think should be prioritized. They're definitely listening. If I've piqued your interest, you can get started right now with a free trial. Just head over to app.firefly.ai to sign up. There's also a link down in the description. You can also check out my first Firefly video to get more information about getting started with the platform. Even though managing infrastructure as code is different than typical application CI/CD, a lot of organizations would prefer to use the same pipeline tools they've already invested heavily in. Firefly Workflows let you integrate those tools with a platform built to understand the weirdness of infrastructure as code. It's about offering a choice and increasing visibility without locking you in. And that's something I can get behind. Thanks to Firefly for sponsoring this video, and thank you to you, dear viewer, for hanging out till the end. Please subscribe to the channel, and if you enjoyed the video and you're looking for something else to watch, I suggest managing multiple environments with Terraform. Until next time, keep calm and Terraform on.